My sister allowed her in-laws to stay at my house behind my back while I was recovering from surgery. I walked in, bandaged and exhausted, to her mother-in-law screaming, "This is my house now." My sister giggled. "They're family too." I stared at her and said, "Then they can pay the mortgage too, because you're all being evicted." I stood there in the middle of my own living room, not even sure if I was hallucinating from the pain meds or if this was actually happening. Morella had this little smirk on her face, like this was just a funny misunderstanding and not a full-blown home invasion by in-laws I barely tolerated at weddings. "You've reorganized the pantry?" I said slowly, staring at Valeska. "I labeled everything for efficiency," she replied, crossing her arms. "You had your pasta and rice mixed together. That's chaos." "That's my chaos," I snapped. "And you're not even supposed to be here." "Helena, please," Morella said, rolling her eyes like I was being unreasonable. "You're acting like this is some sort of crime. We're just staying until things get settled." "What things?" "This isn't your summer cottage, Morella. You didn't even ask." "Because I knew you'd say no," she said casually. "And you wouldn't have. You'd have said you needed your peace and quiet or whatever. You always need to control everything." I was still standing, sweating through my hospital-issued hoodie, my leg throbbing with every second. Baxter trotted in from the kitchen, tail wagging hesitantly. Even he looked confused. "I didn't say you couldn't stay," I reminded her. "I said you, not you and half the Balkan Peninsula." Valeska raised her eyebrows. "Excuse me." I didn't answer. I just turned and dragged myself into the guest room, the only one that looked untouched. I shut the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a minute, catching my breath. I was too damn tired to keep arguing. I ended up sleeping for 10 hours straight. Woke up sore and stiff and absolutely livid. The next morning, the kitchen looked like a BMB went off. Flour on the counter, dishes piled in the sink, a sticky trail of something orange leading from the fridge to the dining room. Bourne sat at the table eating cereal out of one of my soup bowls, reading a crumpled car magazine. "You have coffee?" he asked without looking up. I stared at him. "No. But you have 5 minutes to leave." He laughed like I was joking. I turned to Morella, who walked in wearing one of my old cardigans. "Seriously, what's going on here? Why haven't they left?" "We're getting Rudrick's unemployment sorted out. His dad's pension hasn't kicked in yet. It's just a rough patch. And that gives them the right to move into my home, wear my clothes, and insult my pantry." Morella sighed and sat down. "Why do you always have to be so rigid, Hallie? You're alone. You live in a big house by yourself with your dog and your silence. Is it really so terrible to have some family around?" "It is when that family treats me like I'm in their way," I snapped. "They didn't ask. They moved in. They changed things. They're not going to be here forever." "How long then? A week? A month? Until they find some other escort?" She looked at me like I was being cruel. Like I was supposed to just accept this. "I need you to pack their things," I said, ice in my voice. "They're not staying. Not for another day." Morella stood, her expression hard. "Then you're going to have to throw us all out." There was a beat of silence. And I realized then she meant it. The days that followed were a miserable kind of limbo. I tried to stay in my room as much as I could, but I had to hobble out for food, to let Baxter out, to breathe something other than resentment. Every time I came out, Valeska had moved something else. She put a crocheted cover over the arm of my couch. She rearranged my spice rack alphabetically. She replaced my shower curtain with some horrid pink thing covered in seashells. And every time I said something, she looked at me like I was the guest. "We are improving the environment," she said once, after I caught her putting lavender sachets in my linen closet. "You're trespassing." She laughed. "We're family. Family helps each other. Help yourself out the door." That night, I heard them whispering outside my door. Rudrick's low voice, Morella's sharper one. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard my name a few times. Heard lawyer once. "She's serious. She can't do that." "Oh, but I could." I called Dennis again the next morning. "They're not on a lease, right?" he asked. "Nope. Never signed anything." "I never even said they could stay." "Good. Then file an unlawful detainer. Do it Monday. In the meantime, change your locks. They'll be here when the locksmith comes. Call the sheriff's non-emergency line and explain the situation. You're not evicting tenants. You're kicking out squatters. Legally, it's your house." "God, I hate this," I said, rubbing my forehead. "I just wanted help during recovery." Dennis was quite a moment. Then he said, "I know. But now you have to recover from them too." On Saturday, I made breakfast just for myself. 2 eggs, toast, and coffee. I ate it standing at the counter because Valeska had taken over the dining table with a puzzle. She looked up smug. "I'm glad to see you're starting to join us in the mornings." I looked her dead in the eye. "You have 48 hours to get out." She didn't respond. That afternoon, I filed the paperwork. And the following week, the notice was served. Morella exploded. "You called the court on me?" She shrieked in my kitchen, flinging a wooden spoon down on the counter. "Are you seriously doing this?" "You made your choice, Morella," I said calmly. "This isn't about the spoon. It's about boundaries. And you blew past every single one. You always think you're better than me. Just because you have a house and a salary and no kids and no responsibilities, you mean no freeloaders," I cut in. "There's a difference." Rudrick muttered something from the hallway. I didn't catch it, but Morella's face twisted. "You really don't care what happens to us?" I looked her in the eye. "I care about myself. For once." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. And maybe in a way I had. For the next few days, the house felt like a battlefield with invisible tripwires. No one spoke unless they had to. Doors were slammed. Lights left on. Dirty dishes strategically piled in the sink like a passive-aggressive art installation. Baxter started barking at random noises. I didn't blame him. I wanted to bark too. One afternoon, I came home from a follow-up appointment to find the front door unlocked. Not just ajar, wide open. I dropped my bag and rushed in, heart racing. "Hello." I called out. Silence. Baxter wasn't in his crate. I found him hiding behind the couch, shaking. Then I saw the broken glass near the sliding back door. A shattered mason jar and some muddy footprints. Valeska sauntered in from the backyard, a gardening trowel in her hand and my gardening gloves on her hands. "I was planting dill," she said casually, brushing dirt off her skirt. "You really should have more herbs. It's good for digestion." "You left the door open?" I asked. "It's just a door." "It's not just a door," I yelled. What if Baxter ran off? What if someone walked in? What if she waved me off? So dramatic. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. That night, I locked the door to my bedroom, even though I knew it wouldn't do much good. I barely slept. Baxter curled up next to me, his little body stiff and alert like a furry alarm system. The day after, things went from bad to, I swear I'm gonna scream. I opened my closet and half my clothes were gone. Gone. "What the hell?" I muttered, rifling through the hangers. I stormed into the hallway and knocked on the guest room door, Morella's door. She opened it slowly, like she'd been expecting this. "Where are my clothes?" "I just borrowed a few things." "I didn't think you'd miss them." "You borrowed my favorite cashmere sweater, my Levi's, and my scarf? Where are they?" She stepped aside. Valeska was sitting on the bed, wearing my sweater. It was stretched over her shoulders like a taut drum. "It's soft," she said, stroking the fabric. "You have good taste. Take off." She blinked. "You didn't even ask nicely." I stared at Morella. "You let her do this?" "She didn't pack much," Morella shrugged. "I figured you wouldn't mind." "It's just clothes." "I do mind. You don't get to decide what matters to me." "And neither does she." Valeska rolled her eyes and peeled the sweater off in slow motion. "So dramatic," she muttered again. I didn't even say anything. I just turned and walked out. I was shaking, but not with fear. I was furious. Back in my room, I stood in front of the mirror. My hands were clenched. My face was red. And for the first time in a long time, I said it out loud. They're never going to leave unless I make them. I doubled down. I called the locksmith and had them change the back door lock while everyone was out at the park one afternoon. I installed a camera on the porch. I stopped buying groceries. If they wanted to eat, they could figure it out. But the moment that truly shattered the last shard of hope came later that week. I walked into the living room to find Boren smoking a cigar with the windows shut. "What are you doing?" "This is a non-smoking house." He looked at me with the slow, smug confidence of someone who thought he was untouchable. "It's cold outside." I walked over, opened every window, and turned on the ceiling fan. "Get out," I snapped. He smiled. "This is comfortable. I like this chair. It's not yours." "Maybe not yet." That stuck with me. Not yet? Were they planning to stay? Forever? Morella wasn't even pretending anymore. She stopped helping with anything. The few times we passed in the hallway, she'd look through me like I was the guest. Like I was the one trespassing in my own home. The last straw? A week before the court date, I came home to find a for sale sign on my lawn. I thought I was seeing things at first. I blinked. Stepped closer. It was real. A big, ugly for sale by owner sign hammered into my front yard. I stormed inside, heart pounding. Morella. She came out of the kitchen with a glass of wine in her hand. "My wine. What the hell is this?" I said, pointing out the window. She barely blinked. Rudrick thought maybe it was time to consider other options. "You're clearly not happy here. Maybe you'd be better off in an apartment downtown." My mouth dropped open. "You think you can sell my house? Well, you're not doing much with it." "That's because I've been recovering from surgery and babysitting a bunch of freeloaders." She shrugged. We were trying to help. I laughed. Laughed like someone who'd finally snapped. You're not helping, Morella. You're squatting. You're stealing. You're... I stopped myself. My voice was trembling. She sighed dramatically and sipped her wine. You're being irrational again. I turned and walked out. I didn't trust myself not to throw the glass at her. I called Dennis again that night. They're escalating, I told him. I think they're trying to get me to move out. It was quite a long moment. Then he said, we'll get this done. Hold tight. You're almost there. Almost there. But those last few days? They dragged for years. The next day, I pulled that damn for sale sign out of the ground myself. It wasn't even easy. It was wedged in there like they'd planned on it staying. I had to twist and yank it like I was pulling a rotten tooth out of the lawn. Neighbors were starting to notice too. Mrs. Aldridge from across the street waved at me with this confused look on her face, mouthing, selling. I shook my head. Nope. Just cleaning up. Later that evening, I caught Valeska in the kitchen scribbling in a little notebook. What's that? I asked, already dreading the answer. She didn't even look up. List of repairs. For what? For resale value. I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. There is no resale. This house isn't being sold. Well, she said in that high-handed tone of hers, you should think about it. You'd get a good price with the market right now. We've already had a few calls from people walking by the sign. My stomach turned. You gave them your number? She finally looked up. No. I gave them Morella's. That night, I gathered every single piece of mail, every one of my documents, my bank statements, my house deed, my pay stubs, and I locked them all in my office with a brand new deadbolt. Morella had a key to the house, but she wasn't getting into that room. Not anymore. 2 days before the court date, I noticed Morella sitting on the porch swing with Rudrick, whispering. I could tell they didn't know I was watching from the upstairs window. She kept looking toward the front door, then toward the mailbox, then back at him. He was shaking his head, and she was doing that thing where she pushed her lips out like she was trying to reason through a tantrum. I'd seen her do it when we were kids, and she didn't get what she wanted. I used to think it was just sibling drama. Now I know better. It was a negotiation. Everything with her always had been. The next morning, my phone was missing. I searched everywhere. My purse, the kitchen, the bathroom, even the laundry room. Nothing. It finally turned up in the couch cushions dead. Not just dead, powered off, like someone had held the button until it shut down. I didn't accuse anyone directly, but I locked my bedroom door tighter that night. Slept with it propped closed with a chair for good measure. The smell of cigar smoke was still lingering in the curtains. The bathroom towels were damp every time I went to use them. Someone had clearly been using my shampoo. And every time I looked at my sister, I didn't recognize her anymore. We weren't the same girls who used to steal candy from the corner store and dare each other to jump off the swings. That Morella was long gone. This woman in my house now? She was calculated. Cold. So certain she was entitled to whatever she could take. And the worst part? I think she actually believed she hadn't done anything wrong. I got a call from Dennis that night. Just a reminder, court's at 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. I'll be there, I told him. You holding up? Barely. They're still pretending it's not real. Let them. It won't matter. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I thought about everything. How I'd opened my door to her. How I'd asked for help, not chaos. I thought about the nights Morella and I used to stay up whispering about how we'd get out of our house someday. How we'd build our own lives. How we'd be different. But she didn't want to be different. She wanted easier. And I was just easy. Until now. The night before court, it got worse. I walked into the kitchen and found a bunch of people I didn't even recognize. 3 of them, strangers, sitting at my table eating spaghetti. One of the women had a baby on her lap. A guy with a buzz cut and neck tattoo was drinking a beer straight from the bottle. One of my beers. I froze. Who are you? The buzz cut guy looked up mid-chew. Friends of Rubik's. Why are you in my house? Morella walked in behind me with a shopping bag. They needed a place to crash tonight. Just for one night. They're good people. Absolutely not. My voice was shaking. They need to go. Right now. They've already started eating. I don't care if they've started digesting. Get them out. Rudrick stood from the couch, arms wide like he was gonna de-escalate something. Don't do this, Helena. You're blowing things out of proportion. They're just friends. I was gripping the kitchen counter, so hard my knuckles were white. Do you understand how close you all are to getting the police involved? How close am I to losing it completely? Morella sighed, like I was embarrassing her in front of the company. Fine. Whatever. We'll go. Tomorrow. I corrected it. They all looked at me like I'd gone mad. I'm serious, I said. You have until noon tomorrow. Pack your crap. Be out. Or don't. You can explain it to the judge. But one way or another. This ends. Then I turned and walked out. Baxter followed me, ears perked, eyes alert like he knew something was changing. I stayed up most of that night packing the things that mattered. The deed. The savings bonds in my dad's name. The little memory box with the broken watch and Mom's old letters. If they tried anything after tomorrow, they wouldn't find much left to take. My house didn't feel like mine anymore. But that was about to change. The morning of the court date, I woke up before the sun. Baxter was curled up near my feet, snoring softly. I didn't move for a while. I just watched the light creep across the walls and listened to the house breathing. The house I was about to take back. By the time I stepped outside, the air was thick with Tennessee humidity and tension. Morella was in the kitchen, sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Valeska was braiding her hair at the dining table, wearing my silk robe. Boren was watching TV, eating the last of my yogurt straight from the container with a fork. Nobody said a word. I didn't either. I just grabbed my keys, my file folder, and left. Court was uneventful, at least on the surface. The judge was an older woman with gray hair and no time for nonsense. Morella showed up wearing a blouse I hadn't seen in years, probably pulled from my donation bin, and tried to act like this was all a big misunderstanding. I was just helping my sister, she said, batting her eyes. The judge looked at the paperwork. Without her consent? Well, I mean, technically. She never said we couldn't. The judge cut her off with a raised eyebrow. But she filed for an unlawful detainer. She has the deed, the mortgage, and documentation that you've lived there without permission. That's not a misunderstanding. That's illegal occupation. Morella glanced at me with something between fury and desperation. I didn't flinch. Valeska and Boren didn't even bother showing up. An hour later, I walked out of the courthouse with the signed eviction order in my hand. They had 72 hours. That was 3 days too long. When I got home, I didn't say a word. I went straight to my room, closed the door, and called a moving company. Not for me. For them. I scheduled the eviction date with the sheriff's office. I arranged to have movers show up at 8 a.m. sharp. I even bought a set of clear plastic bins so no one could claim their things were damaged. I wasn't going to scream, or curse, or lose it. I was going to handle this like a woman who'd had enough and had the paperwork to back it up. When the day arrived, I woke up before my alarm. The house was quiet, but tense. I could hear someone pacing upstairs, probably Morella, finally realizing it was real. At 7:58 a.m., a sheriff's deputy knocked on the door. Morella answered it, her hair wild and eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. "This is harassment," she hissed. "No, ma'am," the deputy said. "This is a lawful eviction. You've been given notice. You have to vacate." She turned and looked at me, still standing behind him in the hallway, arms crossed, calm as a stone. "You did this," she whispered. "Correct," I said. "And you did everything else that led to it." 2 uniformed movers started packing up their things, gently, respectfully. I'd made sure of it. I wasn't here to humiliate anyone, just to restore order. Boren didn't even try to argue. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, muttering in another language under his breath. Valeska shouted at the movers for folding her scarves the wrong way. The kid was crying because someone packed his tablet. Morella just sat on the steps, watching it all unravel. I didn't look away. It took about 3 hours. 3 long, awkward, glorious hours. And then, just like that, they were gone. After the last bin was loaded into the van and the movers pulled away, I stood in the doorway with Baxter at my side. The house was quiet. Really quiet. No slamming doors. No muttering. No incense. No cabbage. Just peace. And the faint sound of my own breathing. I changed the locks again, just to be sure. Then I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in my reclaimed recliner, and opened a fresh notebook. I started a list. Things I won't tolerate again. Guests without invitation. Excuses that start with "we're family." Letting people borrow my sweaters. Ever. That night, I poured a glass of wine. The good stuff I'd been saving. I put on some Nina Simone, opened the back door, and let Baxter run in the yard without worry. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like mine again. A few days later, I got a voicemail from Morella. No apology. No accountability. Just a bitter, clipped voice. "I hope you're happy. You've made it very clear where we stand." I didn't respond. That silence, that was my revenge. No screaming. No breakdown. No public drama. Just me, standing tall while they packed up and left a house they tried to claim. Because the best revenge is living peacefully in the space they thought they could take from you. And never looking back.